What happens when a laid-back Hollywood icon walks onto a morning talk show expecting laughter, warmth, and easy conversation, and instead finds the air tightening around him like a storm about to break? Before we go any further, if you love explosive celebrity moments, behind-the-scenes tension, and stories that feel like you're inside the room, make sure you subscribe to Stage View, hit like, and drop a comment right now. Trust me, you don't want to miss what unfolds next. The lights of the View studio glowed with their usual daytime polish, soft blues and warm ambers reflecting off polished floors. The audience buzzed with anticipation, that familiar mix of clapping hands and whispered excitement. Jason Momoa stepped out from backstage wearing a loose jacket, his hair pulled back, his smile wide and unguarded. He waved casually, soaking in the cheers like sunlight. To him, this was just another stop on a press tour. Another couch, another laugh, another moment to charm. Sunny Hostin sat at the table, her posture straight, her smile professional but measured. As Momoa took his seat, she glanced at her notes, eyes sharp, mind already racing ahead. The energy between them was subtle at first, almost invisible, but it was there, humming beneath the surface like a low wire. The opening moments were light. Jokes landed. The audience laughed. Jason leaned forward, elbows on his knees, relaxed, playful. He talked about his latest project, his kids, the ocean. His voice deep and easy, like he'd rather be anywhere barefoot near water than under studio lights. Then Sunny tilted her head slightly. "So Jason," she said, her tone still calm, "you've been very outspoken lately about Hollywood culture and accountability." Jason blinked once. The smile didn't disappear, but it shifted. "Yeah," he said slowly. "I think it's important we all look at ourselves, you know?" The audience quieted. Cameras adjusted. Somewhere in the control room, a producer leaned closer to the monitor. Sunny nodded, but her eyes didn't soften. "Accountability is important," she replied, "especially when people with influence speak or stay silent." A pause. Jason leaned back, sensing the change in weather. "Sure," he said, "but context matters." Sunny didn't miss a beat. "Does it?" she asked. "Because some would say silence is the context." A ripple moved through the audience, low murmurs, shifting seats. Jason's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He glanced toward the other hosts, searching for a lifeline, a joke, a redirect. None came. "I don't think it's fair to assume silence means approval," he said, voice still controlled, but firmer now. "Sometimes people are processing. Sometimes they're protecting others." Sunny raised an eyebrow. "Or themselves." The word landed heavier than it should have. Jason exhaled through his nose, the smile finally fading. "I've always tried to stand for respect," he said. "For growth. But growth requires confrontation," Sunny replied. "And confrontation can be uncomfortable, especially when it's public." The studio felt smaller now. Hotter. Even the applause signs stayed dark. Jason leaned forward again, this time not relaxed but anchored, hands clasped. "Are you asking me something specific?" he asked. Sunny met his gaze. "I'm asking whether celebrities get to choose when accountability applies to them." The audience gasped softly. Somewhere, a camera zoomed just a little closer. Jason's inner thoughts raced. This isn't the interview I agreed to. He could feel it, the shift from conversation to collision. "I don't think anyone gets a pass," he said carefully. "But I also don't think ambush leads to understanding." Sunny's lips pressed together. "Ambush," she repeated. "That's an interesting word." The tension thickened, almost visible now, like fog rolling across the table. One of the co-hosts tried to interject with a light comment, but it dissolved in the air, unheard. Sunny continued. "Viewers at home see you as authentic, grounded. But authenticity also means answering hard questions, even when they disrupt the mood." Jason chuckled once, humorless. "I didn't come here to dodge anything," he said. "But I did come here expecting a conversation, not a cross-examination." The audience reacted instantly, half applause, half stunned silence. Sunny leaned back slightly, folding her hands. Sometimes truth feels like an attack when you're not used to being questioned. That was it. Jason's eyes darkened, not with anger exactly, but with something deeper, disappointment. "I've been questioned my whole life," he said quietly. "What I don't appreciate is being painted as something I'm not, for ratings." A collective "oh" swept through the room. The producers exchanged glances. This was no longer a segment. This was a moment. Sunny inhaled slowly. "This isn't about ratings," she said. "It's about responsibility." "And this," Jason replied, voice steady but edged, "is about respect." The clash was no longer subtle. It was open, electric. Two strong personalities locked in a live, unscripted standoff, with millions watching. The audience sat frozen, unsure whether to clap, gasp, or hold their breath. And as the cameras kept rolling, one thing became clear. This interview wasn't going to end the way anyone expected. By the time the show cut to commercial, social media had already begun to ignite. Clips were being cut in real time. Captions were forming. Sides were being chosen. Some viewers praised Sunny for asking the hard questions. Others rallied behind Jason, calling the moment unfair and uncomfortable. Backstage, Jason stood alone for a moment, hands on his hips, staring at the floor. The easygoing surfer energy was gone, replaced by a quiet storm of thought. He replayed the exchange in his mind, wondering how a friendly appearance had turned into a public reckoning. On the set, Sunny adjusted her papers, face composed, but her pulse hadn't slowed. She believed in what she'd asked. She believed discomfort was necessary. Still, she could feel the weight of what had just happened pressing down on the studio like gravity. When the show returned, the air was different. Tighter. Heavier. The laughter didn't come as easily. Every word felt measured, every smile forced. And when Jason finally stood to leave, the applause was loud, but fractured. Passionate. Divided. As he waved one last time, his expression was unreadable. The moment didn't end when the cameras shut off. It was only beginning. Within hours, headlines exploded. Jason Momoa clashes with Sunny Hostin on live TV. The view moment that divided fans. Twitter threads stretched endlessly. TikTok clips racked up millions of views. Comment sections became battlegrounds. Some said Jason had been blindsided. Others said Sunny had done her job. The audience reaction was visceral, raw emotions spilling out across screens worldwide. People argued at dinner tables, in group chats, on podcasts. Everyone had an opinion. And that's the power of moments like this. Unscripted, uncomfortable, human. Now it's your turn. What do you think? Was Jason Momoa treated unfairly, or was Sunny Hostin right to push the conversation into uncomfortable territory? Drop your opinion in the comments, and if you want more intense, cinematic breakdowns of celebrity clashes and behind-the-scenes drama, subscribe to Stage View right now. The commercial break ended, but the tension didn't fade with the music cue. It lingered, thick and electric, like the silence after thunder cracks the sky. When the red light above the camera blinked back on, the audience straightened instinctively, sensing they were no longer watching a talk show. They were witnessing a live fracture. Jason Momoa returned to his seat, slower this time. His shoulders were still broad, his presence still commanding, but something had shifted behind his eyes. The carefree ease that once wrapped around him like a second skin had peeled away, replaced by focus, by guarded resolve. He crossed one ankle over his knee, hands resting together, knuckles whitening just slightly. Sunny Hostin glanced toward him, then back to the camera. Her expression was composed, practiced, but the intensity hadn't cooled. If anything, it had sharpened. "So," she said, voice smooth but deliberate, "before the break, we were talking about accountability and public responsibility." Jason nodded once. "We were." The audience barely breathed. Sunny continued, "You've spoken about being misunderstood in the media. But isn't part of being a public figure accepting that people will ask uncomfortable questions?" Jason didn't answer right away. He looked out toward the crowd, faces staring back at him. Some sympathetic, some curious, some clearly bracing for impact. In his mind, thoughts collided. Answer too softly, and it sounds like retreat. Push too hard, and you become the headline they're waiting for. "I accept questions," he said finally. "I don't accept assumptions." Sunny tilted her head. "Assumptions based on patterns." Jason's brow furrowed. "Patterns according to who?" A murmur rippled through the audience again. One woman in the front row clasped her hands together, eyes wide. Somewhere, a man shook his head slowly, already imagining how this clip would look online. Sunny leaned forward now, elbows on the table. "According to the public," she said. "The same public that supports your work, your brand, your voice." Jason's lips pressed into a thin line. "My brand," he repeated quietly. "That's interesting." He shifted in his seat, turning his body slightly toward her. "Because to me, this isn't a brand. It's my life, my family, my choices." Sunny didn't flinch. And when those choices intersect with cultural conversations, they become public. The co-hosts exchanged quick glances. One opened her mouth, then closed it again, sensing the futility of interruption. This was a current too strong to swim against. Jason exhaled slowly, a deep breath drawn from somewhere low in his chest. I've made mistakes, he said. I've learned. I've grown. But growth isn't performative. I don't owe the world a press release every time I reflect. A few audience members clapped instinctively. Others remained still. Sunny's eyes flicked briefly toward the clapping, then back to Jason. But reflection without transparency can look like avoidance. There it was again, that wordless accusation hanging between them. Jason's jaw tightened. You keep framing this like I'm hiding, he said. I'm not. Then help people understand, Sunny replied. Use your platform. Jason leaned back, frustration finally seeping through the cracks of his control. My platform isn't a courtroom, he said. And I'm not on trial. A sharp intake of breath swept across the studio. Sunny's voice lowered. No one said you were. But it feels like it, Jason shot back, eyes locking with hers. And I think you know that. The silence that followed was heavy, oppressive. The cameras lingered, capturing every micro-expression. The tightening of Sunny's lips, the way Jason's fingers flexed unconsciously, the co-hosts frozen like statues. Behind the scenes, producers whispered urgently. One pointed at a monitor showing social media feeds exploding in real time. Another checked the clock, calculating how much longer this segment could safely run. Sunny straightened her posture, regaining her measured calm. Jason, she said softer now, discomfort doesn't mean disrespect. He laughed quietly, a short sound with no humor in it. Sometimes it does, he replied, especially when it's one-sided. Sunny raised an eyebrow. One-sided. You're asking, Jason said. But you're not listening. The audience reacted instantly, some gasps, some nods, some murmured agreement. Sunny's eyes flashed. I am listening, she said. I just don't agree. Jason nodded slowly. And that's okay, he said. But disagreement doesn't require dismantling someone's character. The words hung in the air, sharp and deliberate. For the first time, Sunny hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second. But it was enough for the cameras to catch. Enough for viewers at home to notice the shift. One of the co-hosts finally stepped in, voice light but strained. Maybe we can take a step back, she suggested, smiling nervously. Jason, tell us about the inspiration behind your latest role. Jason shook his head gently, not unkindly but firmly. I don't think we're there yet. The co-host froze, smile faltering. Sunny looked at him, surprised. You want to keep going? Jason met her gaze. I want clarity. The audience leaned forward as one. Okay, Sunny said after a beat. What does clarity look like to you? Jason paused, gathering his thoughts. In his mind, memories surfaced. Past interviews, moments where he'd laughed things off, chosen charm over confrontation. He felt a strange mix of exhaustion and resolve. If I don't speak now, he thought, this version of me becomes the truth. Clarity, he said slowly, is acknowledging that people are complex. That growth isn't linear. That being human doesn't disqualify you from being heard. Sunny listened, eyes steady. And clarity, he continued, voice gaining strength, is not turning conversations into spectacles just because conflict keeps viewers watching. A collective gasp echoed through the studio. Sunny's face hardened. Are you accusing this show of exploiting conflict? Jason didn't look away. I'm saying moments like this walk a very thin line. The room felt like it might crack under the weight of the exchange. Sunny inhaled deeply, then exhaled. We ask hard questions here, she said. That's our job. And my job, Jason replied, is to protect my integrity. Applause broke out, louder this time, more unified. Even some who had been silent earlier joined in, clapping hesitantly at first, then with conviction. Sunny waited for it to die down. When it did, she spoke again, voice measured but edged. Integrity also means accountability. Jason nodded. And accountability means dialogue, not interrogation. For a moment, it felt like they were circling the same truth from opposite sides, unable, or unwilling, to cross the distance between them. The director's voice crackled in the host's earpieces. Wrap it up. We're running long. Sunny glanced toward the camera, then back at Jason. We're almost out of time, she said. But I'll ask you this. Do you think celebrities should ever be challenged publicly? Jason considered the question carefully. Yes, he said. When the challenge comes from a place of understanding, not assumption. Sunny nodded slowly. And do you think today's conversation came from assumption? Jason hesitated. The entire studio held its breath. I think, he said finally, it came from different expectations. A safe answer, but not a hollow one. Sunny studied him for a long moment, then gave a small nod. Fair enough. The tension didn't vanish, but it shifted, no longer explosive, now simmering, unresolved. As the segment ended, polite applause filled the room, though it lacked the warmth of earlier claps. Jason stood, smoothing his jacket, offering a brief nod to Sunny. She returned it, professional, restrained. When he walked off stage, the audience erupted into chatter. Some stood, applauding harder now that the moment had passed. Others whispered heatedly to their neighbors, already dissecting every word. Backstage, Jason's team closed in around him, voices hushed but urgent. He waved them off gently, needing a moment alone. He leaned against the wall, eyes closed, replaying the exchange again and again. Did I say too much? Not enough. On the other side of the set, Sunny sat quietly as makeup was adjusted, her reflection staring back at her from the mirror. She looked composed, but inside thoughts churned. She believed in accountability. She always had. But she also knew moments like this could ripple outward in unpredictable ways. And ripple it did. By the time Jason stepped into his car, his phone was vibrating nonstop. Texts from friends. Alerts from news outlets. Clips already circulating. Captions framing the moment in starkly different lights. Inside the studio, producers gathered around screens, watching engagement numbers climb at an alarming rate. One exhaled slowly. "This is going everywhere," he said. No one disagreed. What had started as an interview had become a flashpoint, a mirror reflecting society's hunger for confrontation, for answers, for someone to take a stand. And as the world began to argue, dissect, and choose sides, one thing was undeniable. The story was far from over. The car door closed with a dull thud, sealing Jason Momoa inside a quiet that felt heavier than the studio lights ever had. Outside, New York traffic blurred past the tinted windows, horns and voices muffled into distant noise. Inside, his phone lit up again. And again. And again. He didn't look at it. He leaned back against the leather seat, head tilted toward the ceiling, jaw tight. In the silence, Sunny Hostin's words replayed in his mind. Not angrily, not bitterly, but persistently. Accountability. Responsibility. Patterns. He'd faced critics before. Reviews. Rumors. Internet outrage. But this felt different. This wasn't shouted from behind a screen. This was delivered face-to-face, live, with nowhere to hide. His publicist finally spoke, voice cautious. "Jason, this is already trending." Jason exhaled slowly. "I figured. It's intense," she said. "People are split. Hard." He nodded once, eyes still closed. "They always are." But even as he said it, he knew this time cut deeper. Because this time, he hadn't walked away smiling. He hadn't diffused the moment with charm. He'd stood his ground, and the world was watching what that looked like. Across town, inside a quiet hallway at the studio, Sunny Hostin walked alone toward her dressing room. The applause was gone now. The buzz had faded into echoes. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor, each step measured, controlled. She reached her door, paused, and let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Inside, she closed the door and leaned briefly against it. She'd done her job. She reminded herself of that. She always did. But jobs didn't trend. Jobs didn't explode across timelines and comment sections. Moments did. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Messages. Dozens. Some praising her courage. Others accusing her of crossing a line. She set the phone face down on the counter, staring at her reflection instead. Her expression was calm, but her eyes betrayed a storm of thought. Did I push too hard? The question crept in uninvited. She pushed it away. Hard questions are the point, she countered internally. Comfort doesn't change culture. Still, something about Jason's last look, steady, disappointed, lingered longer than she expected. Back online, the moment had already taken on a life of its own. Clips sliced into seconds-long fragments flooded social media. One angle showed Sunny leaning forward, intense, unwavering. Another showed Jason's jaw tightening, his voice lowering, his eyes darkening. Each clip told a different story depending on who shared it. Sunny Hostin destroys Jason Momoa on live TV. Jason Momoa stands up to host an awkward view moment. Was Jason Momoa ambushed? Hashtags collided. Fans argued. Comment sections burned. Some viewers applauded Sunny. Finally, someone asking real questions, they wrote. Celebrities shouldn't get a free pass. Others rallied behind Jason. He came for a conversation, not a trial. This was uncomfortable to watch. The audience reaction that had been contained within the studio now spilled outward, multiplied by millions. Late-night hosts joked about it that evening, careful not to take sides, but unable to resist the spectacle. Political commentators dissected the exchange as if it were a debate. Body language experts uploaded slow-motion breakdowns, narrating every blink, every pause, every shift in posture. Jason's team huddled in a hotel suite that night, laptops open, screens glowing. "We can put out a statement," one suggested. "Clarify your position." Jason stared at the city skyline through the window. "Clarify what?" he asked quietly. "That I'm human?" Silence followed. His manager spoke carefully. "If you don't say anything, people will decide what it meant for you." Jason turned back toward them. "They already are." He sank into a chair, rubbing his face with both hands. For years, he'd navigated fame by being open, warm, approachable. This confrontation, had forced him into a different role. Defensive. Firm. Exposed. "I didn't go there to fight," he said finally. "But I wasn't going to let myself be boxed into a story that isn't true." No one argued. Across the city, Sunny sat at her kitchen table long after dark, a cup of tea cooling untouched in front of her. The house was quiet. No studio lights. No applause signs. Just her thoughts. She scrolled now, reading more than she should. Praise stung as much as criticism. Some comments framed her as fearless. Others painted her as aggressive, unfair, calculated. One comment stopped her thumb mid-scroll. "I used to admire Sunny Hostin, but tonight felt like she wanted a gotcha moment." Sunny closed her eyes briefly. She replayed the exchange again. Her questions, his responses, the moment when the energy tipped from discussion into confrontation. She remembered deciding not to back down. Remembered thinking, this matters. But she also remembered his words, dialogue, not interrogation. The line echoed uncomfortably. The next morning, the fallout intensified. News outlets ran full segments analyzing the clash. Headlines grew bolder. Opinions hardened. Jason Momoa's name trended for hours, attached to words like respect, ambush, accountability, ego. Sunny Hostin trended too, her supporters praising her integrity, her critics questioning her approach. At a coffee shop in Los Angeles, strangers argued over it at neighboring tables. In offices, people watched clips instead of working. In living rooms, families debated whose side they were on. The moment had become bigger than both of them. Jason finally broke his silence midday, not with a statement, but with a quiet post. No PR language. No explanations. Just a few lines. "Hard conversations matter. So does respect. I'm always learning." It was vague, human, and immediately dissected. Some praised its humility. Others called it evasive. Sunny saw the post while between meetings. She read it twice. Then a third time. Something in her chest tightened. Not anger, not regret, but recognition. Always learning. The phrase lingered. She considered responding. Then didn't. That afternoon, the producers of The View held an emergency meeting. Ratings were through the roof. Engagement numbers were unprecedented. But the room wasn't celebratory. "This could define us," one producer said. "For better or worse." Another nodded. "People are asking if we crossed a line." The question hung in the air. Lines were invisible things, until someone stepped over one. Jason spent the evening alone, guitar resting untouched in the corner of his hotel room. He watched the city lights again, phone finally face up on the table. Messages from friends poured in, some supportive, some cautious, some urging him to own the narrative. He thought about the audience, the faces he'd seen in the front row. The gasp when he'd said ratings. The applause when he'd said integrity. Those reactions had been real. Unfiltered. And maybe that was the point. He picked up his phone and typed. Deleted. Typed again. Deleted. Finally, he set it down. Across town, Sunny stood in front of her bathroom mirror, removing makeup slowly, methodically. Without it, her face looked tired, but resolute. She thought about why she'd become a journalist. Why she'd chosen this job. It had never been to make people comfortable. It had been to ask what others wouldn't. But she also knew that moments like this demanded reflection, not just from guests, but from hosts. The clash had exposed something raw, not just about Jason Momoa or Sunny Hostin, but about the culture watching them. A hunger for accountability, a fear of unfair judgment, a desire to see powerful people challenged, and a discomfort when that challenge felt too sharp. By nightfall, the narrative had splintered into countless versions, each shaped by bias, belief, and emotion. There was no single truth anymore, only perspectives. And somewhere beneath the noise, beneath the takes and countertakes, the original moment still existed. Two people, a table, a question, a response, a line drawn then tested. Neither Jason nor Sunny knew how, or if, it would resolve. But one thing was certain. The silence before the next move would be just as loud as the clash itself. The days that followed didn't cool the fire. They fed it. By the end of the week, the moment had crystallized into something permanent. No longer just an interview, but a cultural reference point. People no longer said, that episode of The View. They said the Momoa, Hostin clash, as if it were a historical event, a line in the timeline of celebrity reckoning moments. The studio audience footage leaked in longer form, uncut angles showing reactions that never made it to air. A woman in the second row wiping her eyes. A man shaking his head in disbelief. A co-host glancing nervously off camera as the tension peaked. These details only intensified the conversation, adding layers of interpretation like fuel on embers. Jason Momoa watched one of those clips late at night, alone again. This time, he didn't look at himself. He watched the crowd. He noticed how still they were, how no one was smiling, how the room felt like it was holding its breath along with him. That's what people felt, he murmured to no one. Cornered. Not angry. Not entertained. Cornered. The next morning, he made a decision. Not a statement. Not a rebuttal interview. Something quieter. Riskier. He agreed to sit down with a long-form podcast host known not for confrontation, but for silence, for letting people talk until they reach the truth themselves. No flashy headlines. No live audience. Just microphones and time. When the episode dropped, it didn't explode the way the talk show clip had. It spread slowly, deliberately. Jason spoke about expectations. About how fame creates a version of you that people argue over like it doesn't belong to a real human. He didn't attack Sunny. He didn't apologize either. He spoke instead about pressure, about how accountability without empathy becomes theater. Listeners leaned in. Some critics softened. Some didn't. But the tone shifted. Less shouting. More listening. Across the media landscape, Sunny Hostin watched the episode in her office between meetings. She listened without multitasking, without scrolling. When it ended, she sat back in her chair, arms folded, eyes unfocused. For the first time since the clash, she didn't feel defensive. She felt reflective. That week, she opened The View with a brief monologue. It wasn't announced. No dramatic music. Just her voice. She talked about why hard questions matter, and why how they're asked matters too. She didn't name Jason. She didn't need to. When we challenge power, she said, looking directly into the camera, we should also challenge ourselves to listen. The audience applauded, not wildly, but sincerely. Social media reacted again, but differently this time. Fewer insults. More conversation. Some praised her growth. Others said it was too little, too late. But many noticed something important. The temperature had dropped. Not because the disagreement was resolved, but because it had evolved. Weeks later, an unexpected moment quietly rewrote the narrative. At an industry event, cameras caught Jason and Sunny in the same room. They didn't rush toward each other. No dramatic reunion. No icy avoidance. Just a pause. Jason noticed her first. She noticed him seconds later. For a brief moment, the room seemed to shrink again, echoing that studio tension. Then Jason nodded. Sunny nodded back. No words. No smiles. Just acknowledgement. The clip went viral anyway. Some called it maturity. Others called it avoidance. But most people saw what it was. Two people choosing not to turn disagreement into permanent enemy lines. In the aftermath, something subtle but powerful lingered. Audiences began demanding more nuance. Viewers questioned not just celebrities, but the format of confrontation itself. Commentators debated whether live TV was the right place for conversations that required depth rather than spectacle. Producers across networks took notes. The clash had consequences. Not cancellations, not apologies, but conversations about how culture eats moments alive and demands blood instead of understanding. Jason returned to filming, carrying the experience with him like an invisible scar, not painful, but present. He spoke less in interviews, chose words more carefully, not because he was afraid, but because he'd felt how quickly intention could be twisted. Sunny continued asking hard questions, but with a new awareness of timing, tone, and space. Not softer, just sharper in a different way. And the audience? The audience remembered. They remembered how uncomfortable it felt to watch two strong voices collide with no script, no safety net. They remembered choosing sides, and then questioning why they had to. They remembered that moment because it didn't resolve cleanly. Real moments never do. In the end, there was no winner. No knockout line. No apology tour. Just impact. A reminder that live television can still surprise us. That celebrity doesn't cancel humanity. That accountability and respect are not opposites, but balancing acts. And now it comes back to you. When you watched or imagined this clash, who did you feel for? Jason standing his ground? Sunny pushing the question further? Or the audience caught in the middle, unsure whether to clap or cringe? Tell us what you think in the comments. And if you want more explosive, cinematic deep dives into the moments celebrities never expect and audiences never forget, subscribe to Stage View right now.